The Unseen. Restorer Sienna Walsh arrived at the Whitmore Art Exhibition with paint still embedded under her fingernails. She had spent 14 hours restoring a water-damaged portrait from the 1800s, and despite scrubbing her hands raw, traces of cerulean blue remained. The gallery buzzed with champagne conversations and designer perfume. Women glided past in gowns worth more than Sienna earned in 6 months. Men in tailored suits discussed investments and market trends. Sienna wore a black dress she had purchased from a thrift store 3 years ago. It fit well enough, but the fabric carried none of the shimmer or sophistication surrounding her. She clutched her worn leather portfolio containing documentation for the paintings her conservation studio had worked on. Her supervisor, Mrs. Chen, had insisted someone from their team attend to represent their recent restoration projects. The other specialists had declined, citing evening plans or family obligations. Sienna understood their reluctance. Events like this reminded people, like them, that they belonged behind the scenes, not among the collectors and elite. The exhibition hall stretched across 3 connected rooms, each displaying different periods and styles. Sienna navigated through clusters of guests, trying to locate the section featuring restored works. She studied her phone, checking the floor plan Mrs. Chen had sent earlier. Her attention split between the screen and the crowd. She failed to notice the waiter approaching with a tray of red wine. The collision happened in slow motion. The tray tilted. 6 glasses tumbled toward a marble pedestal, displaying authentication documents for a Renaissance masterpiece. Sienna lunged forward, catching 4 glasses but sending 2 crashing to the floor. Red wine splattered across her dress and pooled near the pedestal's base. Her portfolio fell open, scattering papers across the polished floor. The room fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward the commotion. Heat flooded Sienna's face as she dropped to her knees, frantically checking if any wine had reached the precious documents. Her hands shook as she lifted papers, inspecting each one for damage. Thank goodness, she whispered to herself, relief washing over her when she confirmed everything remained dry. The observer, Dominic Cross, stood 30 feet away when the accident occurred. He had been enduring a conversation with 3 supermodels who seemed more interested in being photographed with him than actually speaking with him. When the crash echoed through the hall, he turned reflexively. What he saw made him forget the conversation entirely. A woman in a plain black dress knelt on the floor, her focus entirely on protecting documents while wine soaked into her clothing. She ignored the crowd's stares, ignored her own embarrassment, caring only about preserving what she clearly considered important. Staff rushed over with towels and apologies. The woman stood slowly, accepting a towel but immediately using it, to wipe the floor near the pedestal rather than her dress. Something about her movements struck Dominic as familiar. The careful precision of her hands, the way she handled papers as if they were fragile birds, the fierce concentration that blocked out everything else. He found himself walking toward her before making a conscious decision to move. The recognition that was not quite. There, Sienna accepted apologies from the waiter and event staff, insisting repeatedly that everything was fine. She gathered her scattered portfolio papers, organizing them with practiced efficiency despite her trembling fingers. When she stood up and turned around, she nearly collided with another person. She looked up into the face of Dominic Cross. Everyone in the city knew who he was. His tech company had revolutionized how museums cataloged and protected digital archives of artwork. He funded restoration projects worldwide. His face appeared regularly in business magazines and society pages. And now he stood directly in front of her, his gray eyes studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. His voice carried none of the performance she heard from other wealthy guests. He sounded genuinely concerned. Sienna shook her head quickly. "No, I am fine. Just clumsy. I should have been paying attention." She tried to step around him, mortification, making her desperate to escape, but he moved slightly, maintaining their position face to face. "You were protecting the documents," he observed. That was your first instinct, not to avoid the wine or save yourself from embarrassment. You protected the art. Sienna blinked at him, unsure how to respond. Well, yes, those papers authenticate a piece worth millions. My dress costs $30. The priority seemed clear. A small smile touched Dominic's lips. Most people here would have prioritized differently. The invitation. They stood in the center of the hall while the crowd's attention gradually shifted back to their conversations. Dominic continued watching Sienna with that strange, searching expression. "Have we met before?" he asked finally. Sienna frowned slightly. "I do not think so. I would remember meeting you." She meant it without flattery. Meeting someone of his stature would have been memorable. But Dominic seemed unconvinced. "There is something about you, the way you move around art, like you are having a conversation with it that no one else can hear." Sienna felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. That was exactly how she felt when she worked. Like paintings whispered their stories to her, telling her where they hurt and how to heal them. She had never heard anyone else express it that way. Before she could respond, a stunning woman in a silver gown appeared at Dominic's elbow. "Dominic, darling, the ambassador is asking for you." She barely glanced at Sienna, dismissing her as irrelevant. Dominic nodded, but did not move. In a moment. He pulled a card from his jacket pocket and handed it to Sienna. "I am hosting a private viewing tomorrow afternoon at my personal gallery. I would like you to attend. Your perspective on the collection would be valuable." Sienna stared at the card. This could not be real. Men like Dominic Cross did not invite paint-stained restoration specialists to private viewings. She looked up at him, searching for the joke or the ulterior motive. "Why me?" Dominic's expression remained serious. "Because you see what matters. That is rarer than you might think." Then he walked away, leaving Sienna holding his card while the woman in silver shot her a look of pure venom. The whispers. Begin within minutes. Word spread through the exhibition. People approached Sienna with sudden interest, asking about her work, her background, her connection to Dominic Cross. She answered politely but vaguely, still processing what had happened. Her phone buzzed with a text from her colleague Fiona. "Did you really just get invited somewhere by Dominic Cross? Everyone is talking about it." Sienna looked down at the card in her hand. The address listed was in the most exclusive part of the city. Tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. She should decline. This was clearly a mistake or a momentary impulse he would forget by morning. But something in his eyes had been so certain, so genuinely interested, not in her appearance or her status, in how she thought about art. She tucked the card carefully into her portfolio. She would go, not because she expected anything romantic or life-changing, but because someone had seen her, really seen her, for perhaps the first time in her adult life. And she wanted to understand why that recognition felt like coming home to a place she had never been. The gallery lights dimmed slightly, signaling the evening's formal presentations would begin soon. Sienna slipped out a side door, her wine-stained dress leaving drops on the marble floor like a trail of breadcrumbs. She did not notice Dominic, watching her leave from across the room, his expression thoughtful and his memory working hard to place where he had seen those careful, protective hands before. The private gallery Sienna stood outside the address on Dominic's card, questioning her decision for the 100th time. The building rose 12 stories, all glass and steel, reflecting the afternoon sun like a crystalline tower. A doorman in an immaculate uniform opened the entrance before she could reach for the handle. "Miss Walsh, Mr. Cross is expecting you. Please take the private elevator to the top floor." Her heart hammered as the elevator climbed silently upward. She had worn her best outfit, a simple cream blouse and navy trousers paired with flats that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she carried the same leather portfolio from last night, now reorganized and cleaned. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a space that took her breath away. The entire top floor was devoted to art. Natural light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows. Paintings lined walls painted in soft, neutral tones. Sculptures occupied pedestals positioned throughout the open space. But what struck Sienna most was the silence. No crowd noise, no pretentious chatter. Just art existing in peaceful stillness, waiting to be truly seen. Dominic emerged from behind a partition wall, wearing dark jeans and a simple gray sweater. He looked different from last night, more relaxed, more himself. "You came." There was a genuine relief in his voice, as if he had worried she would not. Sienna managed a small smile. "I almost did not believe the invitation was real." Dominic walked toward her, his movements unhurried. "It is very real. I am glad you are here." The language of restoration. He guided her through the collection, and Sienna forgot her nervousness entirely. Each piece told a story, and Dominic seemed to know every detail. A Baroque landscape that had survived a fire, a portrait recovered from a shipwreck, a modern abstract that the artist had nearly destroyed before reconsidering. But what amazed Sienna was how Dominic described them, not by their monetary value or their fame, but by what they had endured and overcome. "This one," he said, stopping before a Renaissance painting of a woman reading, was damaged in a flood 20 years ago. Everyone said it could not be saved. The water had penetrated too deeply, but a restoration team in Florence spent 3 years bringing her back. You can still see faint watermarks along the bottom edge if you look closely. Sienna leaned in, studying the painting with professional interest. "The restorers made a choice," she said softly. "They could have removed every trace of damage, but they left those marks. A reminder of what she survived." "Exactly." Dominic's voice carried excitement. "Most collectors would have demanded perfect restoration, erasing all evidence of the trauma. But I think the marks make her more beautiful. They are part of her story now." Sienna turned to look at him, seeing him differently. "You understand restoration philosophy. Most collectors just want things to look pristine." Dominic met her gaze steadily. "I understand that some damage changes us, and trying to erase it completely means losing part of who we became." The triggering memory. They continued through the gallery, their conversation flowing naturally. Sienna found herself talking about her work with an enthusiasm she usually reserved for fellow restorers. She described the satisfaction of revealing original colors hidden under centuries of grime, the detective work required to identify proper pigments, the delicate balance between preservation and intervention. Dominic listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed genuine understanding. Then they reached a painting that made them both stop simultaneously. It was a museum scene from the 1950s, showing children on a field trip gathered around classical sculptures. The painting itself was unremarkable, competent but not exceptional. Yet both of them stood frozen, staring at it with expressions of confused recognition. Dominic spoke first, his voice strange. "I know this painting." Sienna nodded slowly. "So do I. But I do not understand why." Dominic moved closer to the canvas, studying details with intense focus. "This is the Metropolitan Museum, East Wing, the Greek and Roman Gallery. I was there once as a teenager." Sienna felt her pulse quicken. "I was there too," she whispered. "I was 7. It was my first real museum visit." Her mind raced backward through years of memories, searching for details she had not thought about in decades. The moment, everything changed. Dominic turned to face her fully, and she saw recognition dawning in his eyes like sunrise. "You were the little girl, the one with the red backpack. You were so small, but you—" He stopped, emotion thickening his voice. "You stood between me and 3 older boys who were making fun of my leg brace." Sienna's breath caught. The floodgates of memory burst open. She saw it all clearly now. A teenage boy with a metal brace on his left leg, limping through the museum while other students mocked him. 3 boys, probably 16 or 17, surrounding him near the sculpture gallery. She remembered her teacher had wandered ahead with the main group. She remembered the boy's face, trying so hard not to cry while the bullies called him names. Broken boy, cripple, robot leg. And she remembered feeling a fury so intense it burned away her fear. She had marched straight up to those older boys, all of them twice her size, and planted herself in front of the teenager like a tiny, fierce guardian. "Leave him alone," she had said, her 7-year-old voice shaking but determined. "He is not doing anything to you. You are just being mean because you are too stupid to appreciate art." One of the bullies had laughed at her. "What are you going to do about it, little girl?" She had looked up at him with absolute conviction. "I'm going to scream so loud every guard and teacher in this building comes running. Then everyone will know you are bullies who pick on people who cannot fight back. You will be the ones who look stupid." The truth revealed. "It was you," Dominic said, his voice barely above a whisper. "All these years I remembered that day so clearly. You were the smallest person in that museum, but you had more courage than anyone I had ever met." Sienna felt tears building. "I remember you thanked me afterward. You said being different did not mean being less. You said the sculpture of Nike had a broken arm and was still considered perfect. I never forgot that." Dominic reached out slowly, giving her time to step back if she wanted, and took her hand gently. "That day changed everything for me. I had just been diagnosed with a degenerative condition affecting my leg. I was 15 and thought my life was over. The doctors said I might need a wheelchair eventually. Kids at school treated me like I was already broken. But you," he stopped, gathering his composure, "you looked at me like I was a masterpiece worth defending." Sienna squeezed his hand, her own tears falling freely now. "You were worth defending. Those boys were cruel, and you did not deserve their cruelty." Dominic smiled, but sadness touched the expression. "After that day, I started thinking differently about value. I realized that things and people could be damaged or different and still be extraordinary. That perspective shaped everything. My company's focus on preserving damaged archives. My collection of restored art. My belief that what society overlooks often holds the greatest worth." The complication arrives. Their moment was shattered by the elevator doors opening. A woman stepped out, tall and elegant with blonde hair styled in perfect waves. She wore a designer suit that probably cost more than Sienna's monthly rent. Her eyes swept over Sienna with barely concealed disdain before settling on Dominic. "Dominic, darling, we need to discuss the Singapore investors. They are threatening to pull out if you do not attend the dinner tonight." She spoke as if Sienna was not there, or was too insignificant to acknowledge. Dominic did not release Sienna's hand. "Natasha, this is not the time." The woman, Natasha, finally looked directly at Sienna. "So this is the little restoration worker everyone is gossiping about. How quaint that you are slumming with the help, Dominic. Really builds your man-of-the-people image." Sienna tried to pull her hand away, mortification flooding through her, but Dominic held on gently. "Natasha is my business partner," he said calmly. "And she is leaving now because she knows better than to disrespect guests in my home." Natasha's smile turned cold. "Guest? Is that what we are calling your charity cases now? The media is having a field day speculating why you invited some unknown nobody to your private gallery. The board is concerned about your judgment." Dominic's voice went hard as steel. "My judgment built the company you profit from, Natasha. I suggest you remember that." The doubt creeps. And after Natasha left, the atmosphere had changed. Sienna felt the weight of reality pressing back in. She withdrew her hand from Dominic's, wrapping her arms around herself. Maybe she is right. Maybe this is not a good idea. Dominic moved in front of her, demanding her attention. "About which part?" "That you are not worth my time. That our reunion after 18 years is somehow inappropriate. That I should care more about investor dinners than connecting with the person who taught me my most important life lesson." Sienna looked up at him, vulnerability written across her face. "I restore paintings, Dominic. I live in a studio apartment above a laundromat. I buy my clothes second-hand and eat rice and beans most nights because that is what I can afford. Your business partner is right. We exist in completely different worlds." Dominic stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "We existed in different worlds 18 years ago, too. You were a 7-year-old child, and I was a 15-year-old boy. But you did not let that stop you from doing what mattered." She wanted to believe him. wanted to trust that this impossible connection could survive the reality of their different circumstances. But years of being overlooked, of being dismissed as insignificant, had taught her to protect herself. "I need time to think," she said quietly. "This is all happening so fast." Dominic nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Take whatever time you need. But Sienna, please believe me when I say that finding you again matters more to me than any business deal or social expectation." The outside pressure. Over the next week, Sienna discovered exactly how much attention their connection had generated. Her phone exploded with messages from people she barely knew, suddenly interested in her life. Reporters waited outside her apartment building. Her supervisor at the conservation studio received calls asking about Sienna's qualifications and background. And Fiona, her colleague, grew increasingly hostile. "You are using him," Fiona said one afternoon while they worked side by side on a damaged landscape. "You know that, right? You saw an opportunity and you took it." Sienna kept her focus on the delicate cleaning work before her. "I did not ask for any of this." Fiona laughed bitterly. "Of course you did not. You just happened to spill wine at exactly the right moment, in exactly the right place where the richest man in the city would notice you. How convenient." The accusation stung because part of Sienna feared it might be true. Not that she had engineered their meeting, but that maybe she was holding on to this connection because of what Dominic represented: security, status, escape from her struggling existence. She lay awake at night questioning her own motives, wondering if she was capable of the genuine connection Dominic seemed to believe they shared. The decision point. Dominic texted her every day. Simple messages that never demanded responses. "Saw a Vermeer reproduction today and thought of your restoration work. The museum is hosting a conservation lecture on Friday if you are interested. Hope you are well." Each message felt like a gentle hand reaching across the divide between their worlds, asking her to hold on. But the pressure kept building. Natasha released a statement to the press questioning whether Dominic's judgment had become compromised by personal entanglements. Sienna's landlord mentioned that reporters were bothering other tenants. Her supervisor gently suggested she might need to take some time off until the media attention died down. Everything in Sienna's life was being disrupted by a connection she had not asked for and was not sure she could handle. She sat in her tiny apartment on a Friday night, Dominic's latest text glowing on her phone screen. "I miss talking with you. No pressure, just truth." She typed and deleted responses for an hour before finally settling on honesty. "I am scared. Not of you, but of what happens when reality catches up with this story. I do not know if I am strong enough for what being part of your world requires." His response came within seconds. "You stood up to bullies twice your size when you were 7. You are stronger than you believe. But I understand fear. Take your time. I will be here when you are ready." Sienna stared at those words, feeling something shift inside her chest. He was not demanding or pressuring. He was simply waiting, trusting her to find her way back to the courage she had shown as a child. The courage that had defined her before years of being overlooked taught her to make herself small. Maybe, she thought, it was time to remember who she had been before the world told her she was not enough. She picked up her phone and typed a new message. "The conservation lecture. I would like to go. With you." His response was immediate. "I will pick you up at 6. Thank you for trusting me." Sienna set her phone down and looked around her small apartment, seeing it differently. Not as evidence of her insignificance, but as proof she had built a life doing what she loved despite every obstacle. Maybe that was its own kind of success. Maybe she was already enough exactly as she was. The press conference, the lecture, never happened. On Friday afternoon, Natasha called an emergency board meeting and leaked information to the press suggesting Dominic was making reckless business decisions due to personal distractions. By evening, every financial news outlet was questioning his leadership. His investors demanded a press conference to address concerns about the company's direction. Dominic texted Sienna with apologies and a promise to reschedule, but she could hear the stress even through written words. She watched the press conference from her apartment, her stomach twisted with anxiety. Dominic stood behind a podium, facing dozens of reporters and cameras, his expression controlled and professional. He answered questions about quarterly earnings, expansion plans, and technological developments with calm precision. Then a reporter asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Mr. Cross, there has been significant speculation about your personal life affecting your professional judgment. Can you address the rumors about your relationship with an unknown art restorer?" The room went silent. Cameras zoomed in on Dominic's face. Sienna held her breath, part of her hoping he would deny everything, protect his reputation, let her fade back into comfortable obscurity. Instead, Dominic looked directly into the cameras and said something that changed everything. "Before I address that question, I need to tell you all a story about what defines value." The story told Dominic stepped away from the podium, his posture relaxing into something more genuine. "When I was 15 years old, I was diagnosed with a degenerative bone condition. I wore a leg brace and faced a future that likely included a wheelchair. I attended a museum field trip where 3 older students decided to make me their target for entertainment. They mocked my disability, called me names, made it clear I was less than human in their eyes. I stood there taking it because I had learned that fighting back only made things worse." The press conference room remained absolutely silent. Then a 7-year-old girl with a red backpack walked up to those bullies, all of them twice her size, and told them to leave me alone. When they laughed at her, she threatened to scream until every authority figure in the building came running. She called them stupid for not appreciating art. She stood between them and me like a tiny warrior defending something precious. The bullies left. That little girl turned to me and said something I never forgot. Dominic's voice grew stronger, more certain. She said that being different does not mean being less. She pointed to a sculpture of Nike that was missing an arm and told me it was still considered perfect. She said damage and difference are part of what makes things valuable, not reasons to dismiss them. That 7-year-old child taught me a philosophy that shaped my entire life and career. She taught me to see value where others see flaws, to recognize worth that society overlooks. The connection revealed. The woman you are asking about is Sienna Walsh. 18 years ago, she was that 7-year-old girl, though neither of us realized it when we met again 2 weeks ago. I did not seek her out because of her appearance or her social status. I recognized something in how she moved around art, how she protected what she considered valuable even at cost to herself. When we finally remembered our shared history, everything made sense. The person who saved me from bullies when I was a broken teenager had grown into a woman who dedicates her life to saving broken art. Reporters began shouting questions, but Dominic raised his hand for silence. "You want to know if my personal life is affecting my professional judgment. Here's my answer. Every significant decision I have made in building this company has been based on the philosophy a 7-year-old girl taught me. Look for value others miss. Invest in damaged things that still have worth. Believe that broken does not mean useless. My connection to Sienna Walsh is not a distraction from my work. It is the foundation my work was built on." Fiona's public challenge. As Dominic spoke, the conservation studio where Sienna worked received its own visit from reporters. Fiona, seeing an opportunity for attention, agreed to an interview. She stood outside the studio, cameras focused on her face, and delivered calculated accusations. "I have worked with Sienna Walsh for 3 years. She is competent at her job, but I have to question what happened at that gallery exhibition. She deliberately positioned herself where Dominic Cross would notice her. She spilled wine in a calculated way that made her appear humble and devoted to art. It was a performance designed to manipulate a wealthy man." The interview went viral within minutes. Sienna watched it on her phone, her hands shaking. Fiona continued with seemingly concerned expressions. "I want to believe Sienna is genuine, but the timing is too convenient. She has been struggling financially for years. Suddenly, she meets a billionaire under dramatic circumstances, and now he is defending her on national television. It looks like a woman who saw an opportunity and used feminine manipulation to secure her future. I am just saying what everyone is thinking." Sienna felt sick. The accusation cut deep because it voiced her own fears, the doubts that kept her awake at night. What if she was unconsciously using Dominic? What if her attraction to him was tangled up with desperation for financial security? She grabbed her jacket and left her apartment, needing to walk, needing to think, needing to escape the noise of her own thoughts. The unexpected defense. She walked without direction, ending up in a small park near the river. The evening air was cool, and the sound of water helped calm her racing mind. She sat on a bench watching the current flow past when a voice spoke from behind her. Fiona always resented that you were better at restoration than she was. Sienna turned to find an older woman approaching, someone she recognized from the conservation studio, Dr. Elena Martinez, the senior restoration specialist who occasionally consulted on their projects. Dr. Martinez sat beside her without asking permission. "I saw the interview. I also saw Dominic Cross's press conference. That man is telling the truth about you." Sienna shook her head. "You do not know that. You barely know me." The older woman smiled gently. "I know your work. I have watched you spend hours on a single square inch of canvas, treating it like it contains all the beauty in the world. I have seen you cry when you reveal original colors hidden for centuries. I have watched you defend damaged paintings others wanted to discard. You do not fake that kind of devotion." Sienna felt tears threatening again. "But what if I am with him for the wrong reasons? What if part of me wants the security he represents?" Dr. Martinez laughed softly. "Of course you do. You are human. Being attracted to security does not make you a manipulator. It makes you someone who has struggled and is tired of struggling. The question is whether that is all you want from him." Sienna thought about Dominic's texts, his patience, his understanding of art and restoration. She thought about how talking with him felt like. "Coming home? No," she whispered. "I want him. The person he is. The way he sees the world." The foundation announcement. While Sienna sat in the park questioning herself, Dominic made another announcement that shocked the business world. He revealed plans for a new foundation dedicated to arts education in underprivileged communities. The foundation would fund restoration training programs, provide scholarships for students pursuing conservation careers, and create partnerships with museums to make art accessible to everyone regardless of economic background. And he named Sienna Walsh as the foundation's director. The announcement exploded across every media platform. Reporters scrambled to understand the implications. Dominic's investors, initially skeptical, began to see the genius in his strategy. The foundation aligned perfectly with his company's mission of preserving and democratizing access to cultural resources. It was not a distraction from his business. It was an expansion of his core philosophy. Natasha found herself isolated as other board members recognized the opportunity. Sienna learned about the announcement from a reporter who called her phone. She stared at the screen in disbelief, reading headlines about her new role as foundation director. Dominic had not asked her permission or even told her it was coming. He had simply trusted that she would understand, that she would recognize this was not about rescuing her but about honoring what she already was. A woman devoted to restoring broken, beautiful things and making art accessible to everyone. The final doubt continued to plague her. She called Dominic that night, her voice shaking. "You should have asked me before announcing this. I never said I wanted to run a foundation. I am a restorer, not an administrator." Dominic's voice came through calm and understanding. "You are right. I should have discussed it with you first. I apologize for that. But Sienna, I did not create this position to save you or manipulate you. I created it because the work needs to exist, and you are the person who should lead it." Sienna paced her small apartment, emotion churning inside her. "How do you know I am capable of this? How do you know I will not fail?" "Because I watched you stand up to bullies when you were 7, Dominic said gently. "Because I saw you protect art documents before protecting yourself. Because everything about who you are tells me you will fight for this work with everything you have. But if you do not want the position, we will find someone else. This foundation will exist regardless. I am offering you the opportunity because I believe in you, not because I am trying to buy your affection." The sincerity in his voice broke through her defenses. She sank onto her second-hand couch, exhaustion and hope warring inside her chest. "I am terrified," she whispered, "of failing, of not being enough. of people thinking I used you, of proving them right. Dominic was quiet for a moment before responding. Fear means you care about getting it right. That is exactly the quality this work needs. But Sienna, you need to decide what you believe about yourself. Do you believe you are worth what I see in you? Or will you let other people's doubts become your own? The moment of truth. The question haunted Sienna through a sleepless night. She thought about the 7-year-old version of herself who had not questioned whether she was big enough or important enough to defend someone. She had simply seen something wrong and acted. When had she learned to doubt herself so completely? When had other people's dismissal become her internal voice? She rose before dawn and walked to the conservation studio, using her key to enter the empty building. She stood before the Renaissance painting she had been restoring for 6 months, studying her own work. The painting showed a woman reading by candlelight, her face peaceful and absorbed. Sienna had spent countless hours revealing colors, repairing damage, bringing beauty back from the edge of destruction. This painting had been dismissed by other restorers as too damaged to save. But Sienna had believed in it, had seen worth others missed, had refused to give up. She realized suddenly that she had been treating herself exactly how those other restorers had treated this painting. Seeing only the damage, focusing only on the flaws, dismissing the possibility of restoration. But she would never treat a painting that way. She would never look at broken art and call it worthless. Why was she treating herself with less compassion than she gave to paint and canvas? The press conference response. Sienna pulled out her phone and texted Dominic. "I want to make a statement. Can you arrange another press conference?" His response came immediately. "Are you sure?" "You do not owe anyone an explanation," she typed back with steady fingers. "I owe myself an explanation. I need to say this out loud so I can hear it." Within hours, Dominic had arranged everything. Sienna stood in the same room where he had defended her days before, facing the same reporters and cameras. She wore her work clothes, simple cotton pants and a button-down shirt, with paint still under her fingernails. She had not tried to transform herself into someone more polished or impressive. She stood exactly as she was and spoke her truth. "My name is Sienna Walsh. I restore damaged paintings for a living. I was raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to support us. I buy second-hand clothes and I struggle to pay rent most months. Those are facts about my circumstances, not judgments about my worth." The reporters listened with unusual quiet attention. "When I was 7 years old, I saw older kids bullying a teenage boy with a leg brace. I did not think about whether I was big enough or important enough to intervene. I simply saw something wrong and tried to fix it. That instinct has defined my entire life. When I see damage, I do not dismiss it. I try to understand it, to heal it, to reveal the beauty that still exists underneath. That is what I do with paintings. That is apparently what I did for Dominic Cross when we were children." The truth, spoken Sienna's voice grew stronger, more certain. "I have been accused of manipulating Dominic, of staging our reunion for personal gain. Those accusations hurt because they voice doubts I have struggled with myself. Am I good enough for this? Do I deserve this opportunity? Am I using someone I care about?" But then I realized I was asking the wrong questions. The right question is whether I can do the work this foundation needs. And the answer is yes. Not because I am perfect or special, but because I have dedicated my life to restoring broken, beautiful things and making art accessible to everyone. She looked directly into the cameras, her expression open and honest. "I do not know if my relationship with Dominic will last. I hope it will because I care about him deeply, not because of his money, but because of who he is. But whether we stay together or not, this foundation matters. Arts education matters. Teaching young people from struggling communities that they have worth and potential matters. I will lead this work with everything I have, not as Dominic Cross's charity case, but as someone who understands what it means to be overlooked and dismissed. I will fight for students like I was, like Dominic was, like everyone who has been told they are not enough." Fiona's apology in the audience. Fiona sat with tears streaming down her face. After the press conference ended, she approached Sienna in the hallway outside. "I am sorry," she whispered. I was jealous and petty, and I tried to hurt you because your success made me feel like a failure." Sienna looked at her colleague, seeing past the hostility to the insecurity beneath. "You are a talented restorer, Fiona. Your work is beautiful. You do not need to tear me down to build yourself up." Fiona nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know that now. Watching you up there, speaking your truth despite being terrified, I realized I have been hiding behind criticism my whole life. It is easier to point out other people's flaws than to risk revealing my own." Sienna surprised herself by reaching out and hugging the woman who had tried to destroy her reputation. "We all carry damage," she said gently. "The question is whether we let it define us or whether we do the hard work of restoration." The small gallery opening. 3 months later, the foundation hosted its first event. Not a glamorous gala for wealthy donors, but a small gallery opening featuring artwork created by students from the Foundation's first training program. Teenagers from underprivileged neighborhoods displayed paintings, sculptures, and mixed media pieces they had created while learning about art history and conservation techniques. The gallery space was modest, located in a community center rather than an upscale venue. Sienna moved through the crowd, talking with students and their families, her face bright with genuine joy. She wore a simple dress, nothing designer or expensive, and her hands still carried traces of paint from helping students prepare their work for display. Dominic stood near the entrance, watching her with an expression of complete contentment. Dr. Martinez appeared beside him, following his gaze. "You chose well," she said quietly. Not many people could have handled the scrutiny she faced. Dominic nodded without looking away from Sienna. She handled it by being exactly who she has always been. That is her strength. She does not perform or pretend. She simply exists authentically and trusts that her worth will be recognized. Dr. Martinez smiled. "And you recognized it because you learned the same lesson. That damage and difference are not weaknesses to hide, but truths to honor." Dominic finally turned to face the older woman. "We saved each other," he said simply. "Twice. Once when we were children, and again when we had both forgotten what we learned back then." The proposal. As the gallery event wound down and families departed with proud smiles, Dominic asked Sienna to stay behind for a moment. They stood alone in the gallery, surrounded by artwork created by young people who had been told they were not college material, not artistic, not worth investing in. Students who had proven all those judgments wrong through talent, dedication, and opportunity. Sienna looked around the space with satisfaction. "This is what matters," she said softly. "Not the press conferences or the headlines. This. Giving people a chance to discover their own worth." Dominic reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small box. Sienna turned toward him, her eyes widening when she saw what he held. "This is not a grand gesture," he said quietly. "No orchestra or fireworks or public spectacle. Just two people who found each other twice against impossible odds." He opened the box to reveal a simple ring, beautiful but not ostentatious. The stone was a restored opal, once damaged and now repaired with visible gold joining the pieces. "It is called kintsugi," Dominic explained. "The Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, treating the damage as part of the object's history rather than something to disguise." Sienna felt tears building as she looked at the ring. "It is perfect," she whispered. Dominic took her hand gently. "Sienna Walsh, you taught me that being broken does not mean being worthless. You showed me that the smallest person can have the biggest courage. You reminded me that real value exists in hearts, not in appearances or status. Will you let me spend my life honoring the gift you gave me? Will you marry me?" The answer. Sienna looked at the man before her, seeing past the wealth and status to the 15-year-old boy who had been bullied for his differences. She saw the person who had built an empire based on finding value others missed. She saw someone who recognized her worth, not because she performed or pretended, but because he truly saw who she was. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and certain. "Not because you are rich or successful. Because you see me. Because you understand that restoration is not about erasing damage, but about honoring what survives. Because you taught me to remember the courage I had before the world told me I was not enough." Dominic slipped the ring onto her finger, and they stood together in a gallery filled with art created by overlooked youth. Two people who had saved each other multiple times in multiple ways. Outside, the city continued its busy rhythm, full of people chasing status and appearance. But inside this small community gallery, two damaged, restored, perfectly imperfect people had found something more valuable than any treasure. They had found recognition, acceptance, and love built on seeing and being seen for exactly who they were. The story that had started with a 7-year-old girl defending a bullied teenager had come full circle. Not in a mansion or ballroom, but in a space dedicated to helping others discover their own worth. And as Sienna leaned into Dominic's embrace, the repaired opal on her finger catching light and showing its golden scars proudly, she finally understood that she had always been enough. She just needed someone to remind her of the courage she had shown before she learned to doubt herself. They left the gallery hand in hand, walking into their future not as a billionaire and a struggling restorer, but as two people who understood that real wealth exists in connection, in seeing and being seen, in honoring damage rather than hiding it. And in a world obsessed with perfection, they chose to celebrate the beautiful, valuable truth of their imperfectly perfect love.